Hey everybody, this is an incredible weekend because we're celebrating all the amazing things that God is doing among our next gen ministries. All of our leaders and volunteers who serve with our students and our kids, we're celebrating that. We're talking about the significance of investing in the lives of students and kids and how God is a multi-generational God, that he wants faith to go from one generation to the next. And so as a father of a 17-year-old son, a 15-year-old son, and a 10-year-old daughter, I want to say to every one of our incredible leaders and volunteers that serve with our students, Stacy and I are so thankful for you. Thank you for pouring out your life into my kids and thousands of other kids every weekend. As you pour out throughout the course of the week, you host groups in your home, you pray diligently, and you are making a massive impact. You are the backbone of this church, and we honor you for all that you do to invest in the next generation. Now, today, for the rest of us who are not currently serving with students and kids, today there's going to be an opportunity at the end of our time together to be a part of directly investing in the lives of the next generation. And you're going to hear more about that through the message and through the campus pastors today with an invitation to take that step. And I believe that there will be many of you that say yes to that invitation today to step up to the plate to do one of the most important roles in our church. Now, before we get to the message, I do want to make sure that you know, coming up in 2 weekends from today, we have a very significant moment. We have an event that we're celebrating with literally thousands of churches all over the world with one event called Baptize California. Now, it's called Baptize California for those of us who are churches here in California. And there are actually about 250 people per day signing up to be baptized in over 2,000 churches across Southern California. And we're participating with all these other churches on what is Pentecost weekend. Now, 2 weekends from this weekend, May 18th and 19th, is the weekend that we celebrate when the church was launched. It's called Pentecost weekend. And on that weekend, in Acts chapter 2, Peter preached a sermon and 3,000 people both got saved or chose to follow Jesus and got baptized that very day. And so we're commemorating with other churches Pentecost weekend with baptism. Baptism really is a public declaration of an internal decision to follow Jesus. And if you've never taken that step, you can take that step with thousands of other people across our state and across our world that weekend. And I want to invite you to sign up to be a part of that. In fact, today through your app, there's a little button that says Get Baptized on Pentecost weekend. You can just click on that and take that step. Also, the campus host will talk about that a little bit more at the end of our service. But I want to encourage you to take that step and to consider going public with your faith in Jesus that weekend. Now, in just a moment, Pastor Matt Heer is going to come and bring the message here at the Lake Forest campus. Matt is the leader of our middle school, junior high ministry. He's doing a great job investing in students. His energy, his passion, his heart for God clearly comes through. He's a great leader, great communicator, and I'm so excited today that he's going to bring the message. And so I want to ask you, give him your whole heart, give him your full attention, and let's welcome Pastor Matt here as he comes to the stage to bring the message today.
Thank you, Chris. Wow. Thank you. Wow, thanks, church. So good to be with you. Welcome to all of you here, and then those of you joining us online. I'm so honored to get to share today and this weekend, and I just want to take a moment and say I'm so grateful to be at a church and to serve under pastors like Andy and Stacy, who have such a heart for the next generation. And so, Andy and Stacy, we honor you, and we say thank you for your heart and your vision, for modeling that for us. We're so grateful. Well, like Andy said, I am the junior high pastor, and so this is a little bit new for me. I'm not used to being in a room full of so many adults. Usually, I'm used to our 11 to 14-year-olds in our junior high ministry, so just a little bit different, just a bit, but I'm so excited to be here. Actually, I'm wondering if you could help me feel just a little bit more at home in this room right now. Just a couple things, nothing crazy. If at any point you feel like you need to get up to get a drink or go to the restroom, please feel free. Just do me a favor, grab 5 or 6 people with you and just run there and back. Make a lot of noise. That'd be so helpful to me, make me feel at home. Also, you might have noticed that the message notes are blank this weekend. That's on purpose. That's not a mistake. That's because at all of our campuses, we have different campus pastors and next-gen pastors who are doing the message, which is so exciting. So that means that if you're one of those people that you like to doodle while the message is happening just to pay attention a little bit more, you got a whole page, man. You can make a masterpiece this weekend. Go for it. In fact, if you want to draw me while I'm up here, please feel free. The house rules in JHM are that if you draw me when I'm teaching, you just have to show me the drawing after. Is that fair? Is that fair? We can do that. In fact, I brought some drawings that junior hires have done of me while I'm teaching, just share with you because they're so good. Yeah. Yeah. They're really sweet. They capture all my best sides, I think, and just unrelated side note, if you ever feel like your ego is just getting a little out of control, you need to be brought back down to earth, I got a great place for you to serve. Just hit me up. I'd love to give you more info about our junior high ministry. No, I truly love that space so much. Something I like to do when I'm speaking with students just to get their engagement and their participation a little bit is I like to ask a question and then have them turn to somebody next to them and answer it. So I'd like to try that if you'll indulge me for a moment. I'd like you to turn to somebody next to you. If you don't know them, just introduce yourself really quick and then tell them one weird thing about you, okay? It's a great way to get to know each other. It's one of my favorite questions to ask. One weird thing about you. There should be plenty to choose from, so just pick one. Could be like a weird habit or a weird talent that you have. If you got webbed toes, don't show them, just tell them. But take like 10 seconds, share a weird thing about you with somebody next to you. Ready, go. Yeah. Some of you are very eager. You're already on top of this. This is great. Okay, you can bring it back. Bring it back. Just one thing. I feel like I need to ask this now. Does anybody need a new seat? Would anybody like a new seat? You can just raise your hand, and Usher would be happy to reseat you. Find a new place. I'm just kidding. Oh, it's great. Now, I'll share a couple things because I made you share weird things. A couple weird things about me. One, I just recently discovered that I'm allergic to arugula, the little plants. Who knew that could be a thing? It does weird things to my mouth, so I don't eat that anymore. That's kind of weird. I also, second thing, I have a weird love for trees. I love trees. Are there any other tree huggers in the room? I wouldn't identify as a tree hugger per se, but maybe one step below tree hugger, whatever that is. But I love, this is a beautiful tree. Am I right? I love trees. I'm like always noticing cool trees. I'll point them out to my wife, Sierra. She's never quite as excited as I am, but it's okay, I get it. I think trees are cool. I take pictures of trees. If you look at my phone, my camera roll is just full of tree pics, which is weird. But I actually think, in my defense though, liking trees isn't really all that weird because do you know who else really likes trees? God. He does. I'll prove it to you. I just recently learned this fact that I think is cool. Outside, next to humans, the most mentioned living thing in the Bible next to humans are trees. Isn't that cool? None of you think so. Okay, just me. I think it's kind of cool. Trees are like all over the Bible. There's so many different verses that mention trees. There's so many pictures and metaphors and parables using trees that we see all throughout Scripture. And one in particular I think is really helpful and is really special. In the New Testament, in Romans chapter 11, Paul gives us this really beautiful picture of God's family tree. And he talks about how in God's family tree, everyone who believes and puts their faith in Jesus, whether Jews or Gentiles, are grafted in to God's family tree. Isn't that cool? I love that picture. It's such a beautiful picture that we all get to be a part of as God's family. And that picture of a family tree is one that we're probably all familiar with. Whether you've put together your family tree for your family, which I'm sure is a daunting project. I don't ever want to do that. It seems really difficult. But if you've ever seen a picture of your family's family tree, it's probably really complex. There's lots of branches and offshoots and like crossed out and twice removed and adopted and all these different things in a family tree because our families are beautiful and complex. You know, in a family tree, we get this really, really cool visual of our heritage. And we can trace back and look at the family tree and trace back for generations after generations the people who have gone before us in our family. And in so many ways, for better or for worse, we are shaped and products of the people in our family who have gone before us in our heritage. You know, and if you're anything like me and my wife and our stage of life, we're married with no kids yet, you might relate to this ever-present pressure that we feel, this deep pressure to extend our family tree, to add branches to our family tree. You know, it's like our parents' favorite thing to bring up without actually bringing up, you know what I mean? Like they think that they're being really cool and slick about it, but they're not. You know, we love you parents, all in good time. We're also really loving our little child-free branch at the moment, and I think we're gonna stay there for just a second. So we all have a family tree, and we have this like earthly family heritage that we belong to and we can look at. But the truth is that our earthly heritage is not our only heritage. Because if you are a follower of Jesus, then like Paul says, you have been grafted in to God's family tree. And so those of us who are Jesus followers, we have both an earthly and a spiritual heritage. And that's really cool to think about. We get a little picture of this in the 2 Timothy, in Paul's second letter to Timothy, somebody who he refers to as his spiritual son. And here's what Paul writes to Timothy. He says, Timothy, I remember your genuine faith, for you share the faith that first filled your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice. And I know that same faith continues strong in you. So we see this picture where Timothy inherits the good news about Jesus, the gospel from his grandmother and his mother. They're part of his earthly and his spiritual heritage. And the truth is that every one of us who believe in Jesus, we all had someone, or probably lots of someones, who we inherited the good news about Jesus from, who made investments into our life, who passed on the gospel to us. We are in so many ways a product of their investment. And so if you're a follower of Jesus, here's a question that I want you to maybe think about for just a moment. Who is part of my spiritual heritage? Who has gone before you? Who passed on the gospel to you? Who are the someone or someones who, if not for them, you might not be sitting in this room right now? Chances are that all of us had someone, or probably lots of someones, who passed on the gospel to us. I'd encourage you maybe even to write down names of people who are coming into your mind right now. Write them down on your phone, or if you're taking notes, and thank God for the people who have invested in your life over your years. When I think about that question, who's part of my spiritual heritage, I feel so blessed because there are so many people who made investments in my life from an early age. I think about my parents who raised my siblings and I in a family of faith and instilled that into us from a young age. I think about my grandparents who modeled faithfulness for so many years. My grandpa was a pastor his whole life. He baptized me and made investments in my life. I had so many pastors when I was growing up in my little church, my kids' pastors like Pastor Darren and Pastor Pete, my youth pastors like Matt and Chris and Rachel and Nick. And I had so many small group leaders and camp counselors and mentors who all made investments into my life. And had it not been for those people, I can say with complete confidence, I would not be standing here right now, because they are my spiritual heritage. I inherited the gospel from each of those people. Who is part of your spiritual heritage? There's another question, though, I think is really important for us to think about, maybe even more important than that one, because it's so good and important for us to look back at who's come before us, but even more important is the question of who will come after us. So there's another question that I want you to think about. Who is going to be my spiritual legacy? Who will be part of my spiritual legacy? Who will come after me? Who am I going to pass on the gospel to so that my branch on God's family tree doesn't stop with me? Who am I investing in? That's a good question to think about. We get a really powerful picture of investment in a parable of Jesus, one of his most famous parables, the parable of the three servants, also known as the parable of the talents. It's found in Matthew chapter 25 in the New Testament. And I want us to spend a few minutes looking at this parable because I think it's directly connected to that question of legacy that we're just asked ourselves. But since it's Church Together weekend, we're celebrating our kids and students ministries. I thought it'd be cool, rather than just reading from the Bible, I thought it'd be cool for us to hear this parable the way that our kids do every week in Saddleback Kids. So in just a moment, we're gonna watch a Stories of the Bible video. Has anybody ever seen a Stories of the Bible video? If you do, you know what's up. But if you haven't, you're in for a treat, let me tell you. But before we watch this, I need to take a moment and I need to brag for a second about our Saddleback Kids ministry. Because I want us all to appreciate how amazing our ministry to our kids is here at our church. Their content creation team has put together hundreds of these incredible animated Bible story videos called Stories of the Bible. And these videos don't just serve our kids here across all of our campuses every weekend. They also have this massive global reach through YouTube. In fact, one picture of this, just last month during Easter, the week of Easter, just over the course of that week, the Easter video that they produced had over 2 million streams, and get this, 185 different countries around the world. How amazing is that? How incredible is that? Saddleback Kids, we love you. We thank you for the creative and powerful investments that you're making, not only in our kids here at our church, but literally around the world. So we honor you and we say thanks. And without further ado, let's watch the parable of the three servants.
Stories of the Bible, the parable of the three servants. This is Jesus,
Heyo!
who is the Son of God and the Savior of the world. While Jesus was on earth, he taught everyone about God's love and healed people from their sickness. He did many miracles like walking on water.
Oh, hey guys.
And even raised people from the dead.
Wahoo!
Jesus was sitting at the Mount of Olives with his disciples and teaching them about the kingdom of God. Jesus told his disciples a story. He told them that the kingdom of heaven would be like a man going on a trip who asked 3 servants to take care of his money. The man gave each of his servants different amounts of money according to their ability. To one of his servants, he gave 5 bags of money. He gave another 2 bags, and he gave the third servant 1 bag of money. Then he went on his trip.
See ya!
The man who had been given 5 bags of money invested the money and gained 5 more bags.
All right.
The servant with 2 bags of money did the same and got 2 more bags of money.
Woohoo!
But the man who had 1 bag of money put it in a hole and hid the money. After a long time, the man came back from his trip and checked in with his servants to see what they had done with his money. The servant who was given 5 bags of money showed that he had gained 5 more. And the man said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You did well with small things, so I will let you care for much greater things."
Yeah!
Then the servant with 2 bags of money showed that he had gained 2 more. And the man was happy and said, "Well done" to the servant.
Thank you!
Then the servant who had hid the money showed the man the 1 bag of money and said that he had hidden it because he was afraid.
Aw.
The man said, "You wicked, lazy servant." He said that he should have at least put the money in the bank to get interest. Then he threw out the servant so he would serve him no more. And the man took the money from the servant and gave it to the servant with 10 bags. For he said, "Everyone who uses what he has will get more. He will have much more than he needs. But the one who does not use what he has will have everything taken away from him."
Yeah. Now you get it. Stories of the Bible. It's amazing. This parable has always been one of my very favorites that Jesus gives. And there's so many different angles that you can take this truth. But I think the really unique thing about this parable is that usually when Jesus would give a parable, it'd be in front of a vast crowd of people. You know, because there's always these crowds that were gathering to hear Jesus teach or to perform miracles, to see him perform miracles. But this parable, in Matthew 25, we see the audience is only 12 disciples. That's the whole audience for this parable. And we see that this parable Jesus gives on the Mount of Olives, right outside of Jerusalem. It's just days before the crucifixion. So these are some of his last moments with his guys. You can kind of sense Jesus' urgency in his words here. He's talking to them about the future in this whole chapter before and after this. He's telling them about the persecution that they will face, about the end times, about his glorious return one day that we look forward to. And then right in the middle of that, he tells this parable about telling them what the kingdom of heaven will be like. And in the parable, like we just watched, a master representing Jesus goes away on a long trip, and he leaves portions of his estate to 3 servants. So to one servant, he gives 5 bags of money, to the second servant 2 bags, and then the third servant 1 bag. And he leaves on his trip. And the first 2 servants, we see, they invested what they had been given. So they took the bags of money, 5 and 2, and they each invested, and they got a pretty sweet return. They doubled their investment. So when the master returns from his trip, he sees that both of these servants had doubled what they had been given. He was stoked. He was so happy. And this is what he says to them in verse 21. He says to each of them, he says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities." Let's celebrate together. So the first 2 servants take what they are given and they invest it, and the master is overjoyed. But the third servant, on the other hand, did nothing with what he had been given. Rather than investing like the first 2, the third servant takes his 1 bag of money and he digs a hole in the ground and he buries the bag of money. And when we see that the master returns from his trip and he sees that the servant hadn't done anything with what he had been given, he was furious. His words are really strong. We read this in verse 26. He says to the servant, "You wicked and lazy servant." Yikes, it's kind of harsh. Verse 28, he ordered, "Take the money from this servant and give it to the one with the 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now throw this useless servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Now when we read these words, we're like, geez, that sounds a little bit intense. I mean, it's not like, let's be fair here. It's not like the servant lost the money. He didn't squander it. He didn't make a bad investment and lose it all. He didn't try to steal from it or embezzle it. He had all of the money to return to the master when he returned, but clearly the master had different expectations. The master expected investment. He expected all 3 of his servants, not just a couple of them, to invest what they had been given and get a return on it. I think that there is a temptation that a lot of us feel sometimes as followers of Jesus to kind of just stay in our lane. You know, in the New Testament, Paul describes the life of a follower of Jesus as kind of like an athlete running a race. So we can kind of have that visual in our minds of like lanes on a track. And sometimes we just, as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we just default to just staying in our lane on the track. Like I'll go to church, I'll do my best to avoid sin, I'll listen to worship music on my way to work, I might even tithe and read my Bible, who knows? But I'm just gonna kind of stay in my lane and focus on me, and everybody else can do them. They can worry about themselves. That's kind of how some of us are tempted to live our lives as followers of Jesus sometimes. Now, all those things are great. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But what if faithfulness is about something different? What if what it looks like to run the race of faith well is not just about how well I run in my lane, but how well I help others run? What if faithfulness is not only about me receiving the gospel, but also about me passing it on as well? And if you're taking notes, that might be something worth writing down, because this is something that's been so challenging to me recently. What if faithfulness, my idea of faithfulness, is not just about me knowing Jesus and trying my best to follow him, but also about helping others to follow him, passing on this good news that I've heard from myself and received to someone else? What if that's what faithfulness looks like? I think it's safe to assume in this room, in this church, in this house, it's safe to assume, I think, that we all want to see the gospel of Jesus thrive in the next generations. Am I correct in that assumption? Like, is that what we want? I believe that. We all want to see our kids and our teenagers be transformed through relationships with Jesus. We want to see revival happen in these next generations, don't we? We want to see that. But here's the thing, here's the reality. The gospel is not going to thrive in the next generations by accident. Like, it's not going to just thrive on its own. In fact, all the research is telling us that it's not doing that. All the research about Gen Z and faith, Gen Zs are current high school and college students, all the research says that they are the first post-Christian generation in America. And the early reports from Gen Alpha, which is our current junior high and younger, is looking even more bleak. The gospel is not going to just thrive by default, by accident, on its own. The gospel is not going to thrive in the next generations if all of us just kind of stay in our lane. The gospel is not going to thrive in the next generations if we all just hold on and keep for ourselves what the master has entrusted to us and do nothing with it. No, my friends, I really believe that the gospel is only going to thrive in the next generations if it is invested by those who have already received it. If it is invested. And I believe that investing in the next generation takes all of us. God is inviting every one of us to be a part of expanding his family tree, to adding branches to his family tree. He is entrusting every single member of his family with this responsibility. I don't think it's just for a few of us who are called to it. I think we are all part of God's family and share this responsibility. And by the way, the kids and students here in our church, our part of God's family, are not just cute, anonymous young people. They are our sons and daughters. They are our little brothers and sisters. And I believe that we have a collective responsibility and privilege of investing the gospel into our kids and our students. It's not just for some of us. I believe it's for all of us. The gospel is not going to thrive in the next generations by accident. It needs to be invested. We need to pass on the power and the hope and the truth of the gospel of Jesus into our kids and our students. Several years ago, researchers from Fuller Youth Institute out of Fuller Seminary did this research study where they tracked faith engagement with young people after they graduated from their high school youth groups and entered into young adulthood. And what they found is that the young people who stayed engaged with their faith into young adulthood, there's one factor that rose to the top that promoted that promoted thriving faith beyond kids and student ministries. That one factor that rose to the top was not how cool the youth group was, not how fun the games were, not how awesome the worship was. The one factor that promoted thriving faith beyond kids and student ministries was this: intergenerational relationships. Authentic relationships with followers of Jesus that were both older and younger than them in their church. That was the greatest factor that led to their faith sticking beyond kids and student ministries. Friends, in our ministries and our staff, we all say all the time that we're in the business of adult faith, not just kids' faith. We want to set them up on a trajectory for long-term faith, but it will take all of us to see that happen.